Welcome back to T's Theses. Today's video is sponsored by... Just kidding, y'all know I ain't got no sponsors. But seriously though, for today's video, I have for you guys a young adult dark fantasy monster novel entitled I Feed Her to the Beast, and the Beast is Me by author Jamison Shea. There's one thing that I want to address before I begin today's review. The author has sort of a disclaimer at the beginning of the book that I found to be kind of interesting, and I want to go ahead and read you the second paragraph of that disclaimer before I address how I feel about it. So it states that, foremost, this book contains copious depictions of blood and features realistic self-harm with the purpose of summoning a non-human entity. There are also descriptions of bones and corpses, body horror, and an instance of body shaming relating to ballet, non-graphic torture, and murder. Finally, there are references to classism and racism, as well as parental neglect, abandonment that, while not graphically depicted, still permeates the work. Now let's have some fun. So the thing about this disclaimer is the fact that the author felt the need to add it to her story. Is listed as a dark fantasy novel. So right off the bat, you should be looking for some type of gore or horrific contents within this novel. And the fact that she had to explain that there was parental abandonment in this story, if you read fiction, regardless if it's fantasy or literary or realistic, 90% of any fiction novel is going to contain some real life events. In order for the author to get us to have a connection with the character, you're going to need to throw in something real life, something that the reader can relate to. I mean, we're living in a world where people dedicate their free time to true crime podcasts. They watch these documentaries on Netflix where you have these serial killers, and a lot of people are so desensitized that they will film a gory crime scene and post it on social media. So I'm trying to figure out who the author's audience is, that she's worried about triggering someone before they even start reading her book. So we have to be alerted to what we might find inside in case we get a little upset by it. But anyways, those are my thoughts on disclaimers, and moving on to today's novel. So in I Feed Her to the Beast, and the Beast is Me, we meet a 17-year-old girl by the name of Lawrence, and Lawrence has dedicated the last 9 years of her life to ballet. And so the thing about that is, even though Lawrence is one of the best dancers at the academy, she kind of feels like she's not getting noticed. She's not getting the recognition that she deserves. And the reason why Lawrence feels that way is because the other girls at the academy, they come from money. And Lawrence feels that because she's there on a scholarship and she's basically an orphan, she feels like she's an outsider. She feels like this is the reason why the other girls shun her and why she's not really getting the recognition among her instructors that she deserves. However, when a young girl by the name of Josephine, who's from the wrong side of the tracks, begins to stand out and begins to take roles from ballerinas who's been doing this for years, Lawrence starts to take notice, and she begins to think that if Josephine can do this, then why can't I? And so with this new lease on life, Lawrence begins to practice longer and practice harder. And so one night while she's practicing for this audition the next day, she does a leap and she doesn't fall right. Fortunately, Josephine happens to be nearby, and she comes in and she helps Lawrence off the floor, and she begins to tell Lawrence that she does have what it takes to be the perfect ballerina. And so with a little bit of praise from Josephine, Lawrence begins to feel herself. And so when Josephine asks her to dinner that night, she goes along. And so while they're at dinner that night, Lawrence begins to notice that not only does Josephine command attention when she's performing ballet, but everybody at the restaurant seems to be drawn to Josephine. The patrons in the table nearby, the wait staff, they're bringing them alcohol ball, even though Lawrence is underage. And so after they leave the restaurant, they begin to walk the streets of Paris. And it's not long before Lawrence realized that Josephine has led her to the catacombs within the city. And as they make their way down, Josephine leads Lawrence to a lake of blood, and she tells her that the favor that she has been receiving is all thanks to this god by the name of Acheron, and that if Lawrence wants the same favor that she has received, and if Acheron finds her worthy, that all she has to do is slit her wrists and give her blood to the lake. And so because Lawrence wants that favor that Josephine's been receiving, she cuts not one, but two of her wrists and drips blood within the lake. And Acheron asks, what is it that she wants from him? And she asks for the power to allow people to see her. And he makes an agreement with her that for 3 months, she will wield this power as long as she keeps this mark of a tattoo of a blood river on her wrist. And as long as that mark stays on her body, she has his favor. However, if she does lose that mark, not only does she lose Acheron's favor, but she loses the ability to perform ballet for the rest of her life. So the majority of the story focuses on Lawrence and how she uses her new abilities to get these starring roles in these ballet productions. Unfortunately, she soon realizes that it's not just her status in life that has been holding her back. It's the fact that people just don't see her in these roles. And the reason why they don't see her in these roles is because of the color of her skin. And so when she finally realizes that, it causes this anger to rise up inside her. And she soon finds out that not only is she able to bend people at her will, she's able to hurt people. She can control breathing. She can actually suffocate someone without touching them. And if she wants you to have a broken leg, then all she has to do is think it. And so she starts to wonder, is this me or is it this demigod inside of me? And if it is me, do I love ballet as much as I think I do? Am I willing to continue to run my body down? Are the split toenails and the bruises on my body worth it when nobody else cares but me? And for the most part, I did enjoy I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me, but I did have a few issues. One, I wish it had been longer. I felt that there were parts of the story that should have been fleshed out a little more. For instance, at the beginning of the story, we meet Lawrence, we learn about Josephine, and then she's making this pact with this demigod. I wish the author hadn't jumped through that process so fast. And then there's this issue with her and her best friend Coraline, where I guess we have this issue of classism, where from the time when Lawrence enters into the academy, her and Coraline becomes friends, and Coraline is rich. Her mother is an ex-prima donna, so with that comes status. But when Lawrence begins to wield this power and she begins to get these roles, that leaves Caroline behind, and the status that comes with her having a prima donna mother no longer matters, and Caroline doesn't like that. Caroline is most happy with Lawrence being in her shadow, and she doesn't like this new Lawrence. So I would have liked to have seen a lot more of that dynamic within the story, because for the majority of the story, once Lawrence gets her powers, she begins to hang out with these other people who have made a pact with Acheron. And so because of that, we don't really get to see this shift between Lawrence and Coraline. And then there's the issue with the ending. I'm not really sure how I feel about that, because in the story, Lawrence makes a pact with Acheron. However, we know what Lawrence receives. We don't know what Acheron gets from making this pact with a human. And we all know in most stories, whenever you make a pact with a god or a demigod, you're giving something up. And most of the time, it's something that you did not realize you were giving up in the first place. But in this story, we don't have that. And so with the ending, it kind of left me thinking, I don't know how I feel. But anyways, as I said, for the most part, I did enjoy the story. So therefore, I gave it 3 stars. So that is all I have for you guys today. And until next time, you guys take care and stay safe and try to do something nice for a stranger so we can all do our part to make this world a better place.